I'm Gary Stevenson, former trader, people's economist. This is Gary's Economics. Today we're going to explain what is wealth. When I was a kid, all the money my family made was from my dad's job. When I got older and got a job myself in the city, all the money I made was from working myself. Now, most ordinary families are like this. When they think about money, when they think about wealth, it's all about work and job. But from working in the city, what I realized was, for very rich families, things are different. For them, it's not about work at all. It's about wealth. Now, wealth is not about what job you do, how hard you work. Wealth is about what do you own. Now, I think for most of us, it's so hard just to get a house that we don't really realize how much wealth there is in society. It's not just about houses and flats. You know, I live here near Canary Wharf. All of those big skyscrapers in the wharf, all of those big skyscrapers in the city, they're owned as well. And it's not just the skyscrapers, right? Walk down the high street, the shopping centers, they're owned. The banks, the restaurants, the pubs, the bars, everything is owned, right? Okay, you might be thinking, I don't know anyone who owns a skyscraper. I don't know anyone who owns a shopping center. And the reason for that is, unlike houses, where a lot of ordinary people do own some, all of this commercial wealth, this commercial property, the vast majority of it is owned by the richest individuals and families in our society. So the point to make here is there's a huge amount of wealth that exists in the world. And I want you to think about this next time you walk down the high street, right? Look at all the shops, look at all the restaurants, all the bars, all the pubs, and think to yourself, somebody owns this. All of the wealth that exists is owned, but it actually goes deeper than that. Because there are a lot of things which ordinary people do own. Ordinary people often own their own house or the flat that they live in. But a lot of the time, the only way they're able to do that is through debt. Now, debt is like negative wealth, right? If you buy a flat for £200,000 and you borrow £150,000, you actually only really own 25% of that flat. Now, that loan doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from the bank, and ultimately it comes from the wealthy individuals who own that bank. So what that means is, even the things which we do own, like our houses or the flats that we live in, often even those things are indirectly owned by the wealthiest people in our country via the debt that we have to take to buy them. Now, this isn't just true for ordinary people and ordinary families. This is true of the government as well. Now, when we're talking about the physical wealth that exists in our cities, in our country, there are a lot of things that are owned by the government. For example, the schools, the hospitals, police stations, fire stations. But if we look at the data gathered by French economist Thomas Piketty, he estimates that the government debt is worth more than all of the wealth, all of the schools, all of the hospitals owned by the government. What that means is, indirectly, via debt, the wealthy people also own all of the schools and the hospitals in this country. But it actually goes deeper than that still. Because it's not just that the richest people own all of the wealth in our society. They actually make a huge amount of money just from owning that. And that money doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from people like you and me. Now, the most obvious example of that is if you rent a house or you rent a flat. You work, if you work here in London, probably end of the month, a third of your pay goes straight to paying the rent. That goes to the owner of the house. If you own your own property, the same thing is going to happen with your mortgage. Now, that money doesn't disappear. That money goes from you to the person who owns the property or the person who owns the mortgage, which in most cases will be a wealthy person. Okay, but this isn't just the case of property. This happens every single time you spend money. When you pay your bills, that money is going towards the owners of the energy and gas companies and the owners of those natural resources. When you go to the supermarket to buy your groceries, that money doesn't all go to the workers in the supermarket. A big chunk of it goes towards the owner of the supermarket and the owner of the building the supermarket is in. When you go to work in an office, a big chunk of the money you make is going towards the owners of the office building. Every single time you spend money, every single time you make money, a big chunk of that money is going from you to the owners of that wealth. It's easy for us not to think about this kind of money that comes from owning wealth, because for most of us, we get our money from working a job. But the richest people, they get most of their money from this wealth income that comes from the things that they own. And the sizes of it can be enormous. So for somebody who has a wealth of £2 million, they can make an income of about £60,000 every year just from the wealth that they own. Like, that is enough to live a pretty good life for an ordinary family. But very wealthy individuals can make a lot more. Somebody who has a wealth of £10 million, they'll probably make every single year £300,000 just from the things that they own, without even having to get out of bed. Now, once we start talking about super rich people, if you have just £1 billion, you will make every single year £30 million just for the wealth that you own. If we look at Jeff Bezos, who has an estimated wealth of $200 billion, this guy, if he makes just a 3% return on his wealth, he's gonna make every single year $6 billion, $6,000 million. So what I want you to be able to realize is, whilst we're out here working for our money, these super rich people, they're making tens, hundreds, even billions of pounds or dollars every single year without working at all, just from the money that they earn from this wealth. And it's important to realize, like I've said, that money is not coming from nowhere. That money is coming from the money that you and I spend. Okay, now recently, the wealth of the richest people in our society, not just the top 1%, but the top 0.1%, 0.01% has exploded. These guys get a massive amount of income every year from their wealth, tens, hundreds of millions of pounds. Ordinary people, like you and me, they spend pretty much all of the money they make over the course of their life. But imagine you're Jeff Bezos, right? And he's making every single year $6 billion, which is $6,000 million, right? Which is, I don't know, $20 million a day or something. He can't spend all of that money. And this tells you something important about the difference between ordinary people and the super rich. Ordinary people spend the money they make, whereas the super rich save the money they make. So what does it mean if the super rich are getting richer and richer and richer, and that money's coming from us? Well, we would have spent it, and they're gonna save it. So if they're getting richer and richer and richer, they're taking more money out of the system, more and more and more money is being saved. Now, in a strong economy, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? They can save that money, they can invest it into growing businesses, the economy can grow. But when we have a weak economy, like what we've had definitely since 2008, the companies don't want to invest and they don't want to grow. So it creates a problem, right? These super rich guys are making huge amounts of money every year from their wealth, and they can't invest it. So what are they going to do? Well, if they can't invest it, there is one other thing they can do with that massive amount of income. They can buy your mum's house. So that is what happens in a weak economy that is very unequal, right? The rich, they own all of the wealth. That means they generate a massive amount of cash flow from the rest of us every single year. They can't invest it because the economy isn't growing. So instead, they use that money to buy wealth from the rest of us, to buy our houses, for example. And that is why you're seeing my generation, younger people, are unable to get houses when our parents' generation were able to get them. Because we're going to have to compete with this huge amounts of income from the super rich who want to buy their houses as well. That's why we've seen houses in this country go up from about 2 to 3 times the average wage to 20 to 30 times. But what does that mean is going to happen if the rich are getting more and more income and they're using it to buy our wealth? Well, that means next year, the rich are going to get even more income from us, which they're going to use to buy even more of our wealth. And the year after that, they're going to get even more income from us, which they're going to use to buy even more of our wealth. And when I say wealth, I'm talking about things that we need, like houses we need to raise our families in. So what happens is you enter a really negative spiral where the working people give all of their income every year to the rich, and the rich use that income to buy the wealth from the working people, which means the rich get richer and richer, and ordinary people get poorer and poorer. And look, I'm not just saying that this is going to happen, right? I've been betting on this for over 10 years now, and I've been right for 10 years. I've made millions of pounds betting on this. And it's going to happen. It's happening right now. So that's really important to understand, all right? Income is about work, whereas wealth is about ownership of things. The ownership is super unequal. The rich own almost all of the wealth in society. That means a huge amount of money gets transferred from ordinary working people to the rich every year. They use that money to buy our stuff. That makes us poorer. This cycle is going to get worse and worse and worse, unless we do something about it. So, what do we have to do? The big problem here is that the money that you and me make from working gets taxed differently to the money that these super rich make from their wealth. Our money, when we work, it gets taxed at source. We have to pay that tax. But rich people, they get their money in different ways. Capital gains, inheritances, trusts. These methods of getting income you get from wealth, it's much, much easier to avoid taxes when you get your income in that way. If we allow that to happen, it is inevitable that more and more wealth is going to get transferred from workers to these super, super rich families, basically. And that is going to mean that ordinary workers in the future are not going to be able to afford houses. And if you go and look at the really unequal places in the world, go look at Mumbai, go look at Hong Kong, or go look at what England was like 100 years ago and it was much more unequal. In those spaces, ordinary working people, working families can't buy houses. So unless we do something about this inequality, unless we make sure that the super rich at least pay the same rate of tax that the rest of us pay, that is our future. Our future is going to be a space where all of our money goes on just paying for the basics of life, and we can never own houses, and the super rich own houses. What that means is if you're born poor, you will die poor, and if you're born rich, you'll die richer. For me, that's not the kind of future I want to live in. So that's why I'm making these videos, and my ultimate message is we need to find ways to make sure the super richest start contributing back to society. So look, that's the message of this video. It's super important to understand the difference between wealth and income and money people make from working versus money that super rich families make just from owning all of the stuff. When I go out there and talk about we need to tax the rich more, people sometimes ask me like, what is rich? Is it someone who makes 80 grand a year? Is it someone who makes 100 grand a year? Like, this shows a lack of understanding of the difference between wealth and income, because I'm not talking about taxing working people. What I want is for working people to be able to make money and buy houses. But we need to make sure we tax the super rich families who are making massive amounts of income from us and using that to buy our houses. If we don't do that, houses are not going to be affordable for working people. Houses are not going to be affordable for future generations. And that will mean future generations cannot get financial security to raise a family. So we need to look beyond just taxing working people and start thinking about taxing the super rich families who might have 100 million, or like Rishi Sunak's family, over £1 billion, because they're generating a huge amount of income every year and they're not paying their bit. Instead, they're using that money to push up house prices, which is affecting our future. If you want to know what you can do to help make this happen, we're going to talk about that more in the next video. For now, like, comment, share, subscribe. Let's make this a thing. Thank you. The richest in our society are making billions off of COVID-19. That is going to keep our economy in a crisis for decades. How many times can you get paid a load of money for betting the world's going to be terrible forever?